The rain wasn't falling, it was lashing, a cold, punishing whip against the grimy brick walls of the alley. And through the downpour, he came, a shadow detaching itself from deeper shadows, moving with a limp that spoke of agony barely contained. Not a large cat, but a presence that filled the narrow space. A thick, battle-scarred tabby coat plastered dark with rain and something else. Something old and rust-brown near his shoulder. One eye, a fierce blazing emerald, fixed unwaveringly ahead. The other side of his face was a ruined landscape of scar tissue, a sunken void where an eye should have been. But it wasn't the wounds, nor the terrible determination in that single green eye that froze the man huddled under the meager awning of the back door. It was what the cat held, clenched with desperate care in his jaws. A small sodden velvet pouch, midnight blue, its intricate gold stitching catching the flickering light from a distant street lamp like desperate fireflies. The man, Ben, hadn't intended heroics. He'd just stepped out back of his struggling antique bookstore. Relics and whispers, for a smoke and a moment away from the quiet despair of unpaid bills. The sight rooted him. This wasn't a plea for food. This was a delivery. The cat, breathing in ragged, wet gasps, dragged himself forward, each step a visible tremor running through his compact frame. He stopped 3 feet away, the intensity of his gaze locking onto Ben's. Not fear, not aggression, a profound, almost ancient urgency. Then, with a soft, guttural sound, he lowered his head and nudged the velvet pouch towards Ben's worn leather shoe. The pouch slid on the wet concrete, leaving a faint, dark smear. Blood. Ben forgot the cigarette, forgotten and extinguished in a puddle. He crouched slowly, the damp seeping through the knees of his trousers. The alley reeked of wet garbage, damp concrete and the metallic tang of rain. Beneath it faintly was the coppery scent of blood and something else. Old paper? Dust? The cat watched him, trembling now, whether from cold, pain, or sheer exhaustion. Ben couldn't tell. That single eye held galaxies of unspoken pain and a fierce, luminous intelligence. Ben reached out, not for the cat, but for the pouch. His fingers brushed the cold, wet velvet. The cat flinched minutely but didn't retreat, didn't hiss, just watched. Inside the pouch, nestled against the plush lining, was a pendant. Heavy, old gold, warm even in the chill rain. It depicted a stylized lion chasing a crescent moon, intricate and strangely familiar. Ben turned it over. On the reverse, deeply engraved in flowing script, were 3 words: Semper in lumine, always in the light. A shiver unrelated to the cold traced Ben's spine. Where had this creature found such a thing? Why bring it here? To him? As if reading his thoughts, the cat let out a low, pained mewl, more vibration than sound. Then his legs buckled. He collapsed onto his side, a small broken heap of wet fur and defiance, his breathing suddenly shallow and rapid. The eye remained, open, fixed on Ben, the emerald light dimming. Panic, sharp and immediate, cut through Ben's shock. This wasn't just a stray with a curious trinket. This was life bleeding out on his doorstep. "Okay, soldier," Ben murmured, his voice rough, with unexpected emotion. "Okay, let's get you inside." He shrugged out of his thick woolen jacket, ignoring the icy bite of the rain instantly soaking his shirt. Moving with deliberate slowness, he draped the jacket over the shivering cat, creating a makeshift stretcher. The cat offered no resistance, only a soft, pained sigh as Ben carefully gathered the bundle, velvet pouch still clutched in his own hand, the pendant cold against his palm. He felt the cat's fragile weight, the alarming heat radiating from the wounded shoulder even through the jacket. The journey back through the cluttered stockroom of relics and whispers felt endless. The familiar scent of old paper, leather bindings, and dust felt jarringly incongruous with the raw, wet animal life he carried. He laid the bundle gently on the cleared space of his worn oak desk, the only clear surface amidst towers of unsorted books. Under the bright, unforgiving fluorescent light, the cat's injuries looked worse. The wound near his shoulder wasn't just old, it was fresh, jagged, and deep, oozing sluggishly. Claw marks? Teeth? The old scar where his eye had been was a puckered, hairless testament to past brutality. Yet, despite the obvious agony, the cat remained preternaturally still, watching Ben with that unnerving single eye. Ben rummaged frantically in his first aid kit. Gauze, antiseptic wipes, would it sting too much? An old, clean tea towel for pressure. He approached the desk slowly. "Easy now," Ben soothed, his hand hovering near the cat's head, not quite touching. "Just gonna try and stop the bleeding, all right?" He expected a snarl, a swipe, the instinctive terror of a cornered animal. The cat blinked his one eye slowly. Then, with immense effort, he tilted his head slightly, offering his wounded shoulder towards Ben's hovering hand. The gesture, this deliberate offering of trust from a creature sculpted by hardship, hit Ben like a physical blow. His breath caught. Carefully, oh so carefully, he pressed the folded tea towel against the wound. The cat tensed, a low rumble vibrating in his chest, but he didn't lash out. He held Ben's gaze, the green eye wide, trusting. Time seemed to fracture. In that silent exchange, amidst the smell of blood and antiseptic and old books, something profound passed between them, a fragile bridge built on shared pain and unexpected compassion. Ben felt a lump form in his throat. He applied pressure, whispering nonsense reassurances. "You're all right, tough guy. Just hold on." The bleeding slowed, but Ben knew it was a temporary fix. He needed a vet. Now. He reached for his phone, juggling it awkwardly while maintaining pressure. The cat's eye drifted shut for a moment, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. Ben quickly dialed the 24-hour emergency clinic across town, his voice tight with urgency as he described the cat's condition and the mysterious pouch. As he spoke, his gaze fell back on the pendant lying beside the cat on the desk. Semper, in lumine. The phrase echoed in his mind, stirring a long-buried memory, indistinct but unsettling. His grandmother? An old family story? Before he could grasp it, the cat stirred. His eyes snapped open, suddenly alert, focused not on Ben, but on the cluttered bookshelf behind him. His ears, what remained of the tattered left one, swiveled forward. A low, guttural growl began deep in his chest, a sound entirely different from the pained rumble before. It was pure, primal warning. Ben froze, phone still pressed to his ear, the receptionist's voice a distant buzz. He followed the cat's intense, terrified gaze. There was nothing there, just shadows dancing between stacks of dusty books. Yet the cat's reaction was visceral. He tried to push himself up, a whine escaping him as the movement jarred his wound, his single eye wide with unmistakable fear, fixed on nothing Ben could see. The growl intensified, raw and desperate. The hair along the cat's spine stood, rigid. It was the look of an animal seeing a ghost, or a predator cloaked in darkness. Then, outside the thick old door leading to the alley, came a sound that turned Ben's blood to ice. Not the rain, not the distant city hum, a soft, deliberate scrape, like metal dragging slowly, almost lazily, across the concrete step. Once, a pause, then again, scrape. The cat flattened himself against the desk, a terrified hiss tearing from his throat, his body trembling violently. The emerald eye, moments ago filled with fragile trust, was now pure, unadulterated terror. Ben slowly lowered the phone, the receptionist's tinny voice abruptly cut off as he ended the call. His own heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden oppressive silence that had fallen inside the shop. The only sounds were the cat's panicked breaths and the relentless drumming of the rain, and that chilling, deliberate scrape outside the door. Who was out there? What did they want? Was it the cat? The pendant? He moved on silent feet towards the stockroom door, pressing his ear against the cold, painted wood. Nothing. Only the rain. Had he imagined it? The tension stretched, thin and razor-sharp. He risked a glance through the door's small, wire-reinforced window into the dark stockroom. Rain-streaked windows showed only the distorted reflection of the room behind him. Empty. Maybe it was just the wind, a loose piece of metal. But the cat's terror was real. Palpable. Taking a shaky breath, Ben turned the deadbolt, the metallic clunk unnaturally loud. He slid the heavy security chain into place. Just a precaution. He turned back towards the desk, forcing a semblance of calm. "It's okay," he whispered, though he felt far from okay. "Just the wind. We're safe inside." The cat wasn't looking at him anymore. His terrified gaze was locked back onto the bookshelf, specifically a lower shelf crammed with old leather-bound ledgers and boxes. He let out another low, distressed whine, trying again to crawl, dragging his injured body towards the perceived threat, towards the shelf, his movements weak and frantic. Ben rushed back to the desk. No, stay still. You'll hurt yourself worse." He gently restrained the cat, his hand resting lightly on the damp, trembling flank. The cat shuddered but stopped struggling, collapsing back, panting, his eye still, wide and fixed on the shelf. Ben followed his gaze. What was he seeing? What did he know? Driven by a compulsion he didn't understand, Ben knelt beside the shelf. He pushed aside a heavy ledger, revealing a dusty cardboard box tucked behind. Forgotten inventory, maybe? Old receipts? The cat's breathing hitched. He made a soft, urgent sound. Ben pulled the box out. It was light. He lifted the flap. Inside, nestled atop yellowed packing paper, was a small lacquered wooden case, perhaps 6 inches long, dark, wood inlaid with mother-of-pearl in a swirling, abstract pattern. It looked old, valuable, and utterly unfamiliar. He'd never seen it before in his life. How had it gotten onto his shelf? The cat watched him intently, a low, continuous thrum of anxiety vibrating through him. Ben lifted the case. It felt strangely warm. There was no lock, just a simple brass clasp. Heart pounding, driven by the cat's palpable fear and the chilling scrape still echoing in his mind, he flipped the clasp and opened the lid. Inside, cushioned on faded blue velvet, lay a single, yellowed envelope, no address. Just a name, written in a faded, elegant hand that stopped Ben's breath cold. It was his name, Benjamin Hartley. His hands trembled as he picked up the envelope. It felt thin, fragile. Time seemed to warp. The rain outside faded to a dull roar. The cat's anxious thrumming was the only sound anchoring him. He slid a finger under the flap, the old glue giving way easily. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in the same elegant script. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the first lines. "My dearest Benjamin, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the shadows I feared have found their way to you. Forgive an old woman her secrets, but some burdens are too heavy to pass on lightly. The pendant you now hold, the lion and moon, is more than it seems. It is a key, Ben, a key to a legacy of light hidden in darkness, and a target for those who crave only shadow. They took my eye long ago trying to find it, but they never found the truth." Ben's vision blurred. He looked up from the impossible letter, his gaze locking with the cat's single, blazing emerald eye. The cat stared back, unblinking, a silent sentinel of pain and secrets. The fresh wound on his shoulder, the terrible scar where his eye had been. The pieces crashed together with horrifying clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This cat hadn't just found the pendant. He was connected, deeply, irrevocably. And the thing outside the door, it wasn't the wind. A sudden, thunderous bang shook the stockroom door, the heavy wood shuddering in its frame. The security chain snapped taut with a metallic shriek. Another violent impact followed, splintering wood around the deadbolt. They were trying to break in. The cat yowled, a sound of pure terror. Ben stumbled back, the letter fluttering from his numb fingers, the pendant cold and heavy in his other hand. He looked from the shuddering door to the terrified animal on his desk, then back to the letter lying on the floor. "They took my eye long ago." His grandmother's words. The cat's ruined face, the pendant, the legacy. The shadows were no longer outside. They were crashing through the door. And the one-eyed cat, this battle-scarred street fighter who had delivered salvation and doom in a velvet pouch, was the only living link to a truth that could shatter Ben's world. He wasn't just saving a cat. The cat was saving him, or leading him straight into the heart of a darkness he never knew existed. The door groaned under another brutal impact. The chain held, but barely. Time had run out. The thunderous bang against the stockroom door wasn't just sound, it was a physical blow shaking the foundations of Ben's world. Splinters flew like shrapnel around the straining deadbolt. The security chain screamed in protest, holding, but the metal links stretched taut against their anchors. Another impact, brutal and focused, hammered the wood. The cat on the desk, moments before a trembling heap of exhaustion, erupted into pure feral terror. A yowl ripped from his throat, primal and desperate, his body arching in agony and fear, the single emerald eye wide and fixed on the shuddering door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ben moved on pure instinct, the letter from his grandmother forgotten on the floor, the cold weight of the pendant searing his palm. Protect the cat. Protect the truth. He lunged for the desk, sweeping the trembling animal into his arms, ignoring the sharp gasp of pain the movement elicited. He grabbed the velvet pouch and thrust it deep into his pocket, the lion and moon digging into his thigh. The small lacquered box with the letter? No time. He kicked it desperately under the desk as another devastating crack echoed through the shop. The top hinge of the door tore partially free, the wood around the deadbolt splintering dangerously. The alley door was death. The front of the shop? He pictured the plate glass window facing the deserted, rain-lashed street. Too exposed. Too slow. His eyes darted wildly. The back exit was compromised. The front was suicide. Think, Ben, think. His gaze snagged on the narrow, winding staircase tucked behind a bookshelf, the steep, creaky steps leading up to his tiny apartment above relics and whispers. Sanctuary. Maybe. He clutched the cat tighter, feeling the frantic drumming of the small heart against his own ribcage. "Hold on, soldier," he breathed, the words lost in the cat's terrified yowls and the relentless assault on the door. He sprinted towards the staircase, ducking low. As he reached the bottom step, the world behind him exploded, a final, tremendous crash. The sound of tearing wood and snapping metal. The stockroom door burst inward, hanging grotesquely from its lower hinge. Ben didn't look back. He took the stairs two at a time, the cat a heavy, trembling weight in his arms, the old wood groaning in protest under his frantic footsteps. He hit the landing, fumbled with the key in the apartment door, his hands slick with sweat and rain. The sounds from below were chilling. Heavy footsteps crunching on broken wood, a low guttural curse, the shattering of glass as something was overturned. The lock clicked. Ben slammed the apartment door shut behind him, ramming the deadbolt home and sliding the flimsy security chain. It felt pitifully inadequate. He backed into the center of the small, cluttered living space, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his eyes fixed on the door. The cat had gone terrifyingly silent in his arms, rigid with fear, his one eye wide and unblinking, fixed on the same door. They stood frozen, two hearts hammering against the storm and the violence below. The only sounds were the drumming rain on the skylight and the muffled sounds of destruction emanating from his ruined shop. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Ben strained his ears. Were the footsteps coming up the stairs? The silence from below became more terrifying than the noise. Were they searching? Waiting? He looked down at the cat. The animal was trembling, violently, but his gaze was locked onto Ben's face now, not the door. That fierce green eye held a depth of understanding, a shared terror, and a silent plea. Ben saw the fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandage, staining his shirt. The adrenaline that had propelled him was fading, replaced by a cold dread. The cat needed help. Now. And they were trapped. A new sound pierced the tense silence, not from below, from outside. The distant, beautiful, life-saving wail of a siren, growing louder, closer. Ben had forgotten the aborted call to the vet clinic. They'd sent help, or the police. He didn't care which. Below, a sharp, angry shout. The sounds of hurried movement, retreating footsteps, the alley door slamming shut. Then silence. Utter, profound silence, broken only by the fading siren and the relentless rain. Ben's legs almost buckled. He sank to his knees on the worn rug, still clutching the cat. The animal let out a shuddering sigh, his body going limp, his head lolling, against Ben's chest. That single eye blinked slowly, heavily, the fierce light dimmed by pain and exhaustion, but fixed on Ben. In that shared aftermath of terror, a bond forged in adrenaline and blood solidified. Ben gently stroked the damp, scarred fur between the cat's ears. "They're gone," he whispered, his voice thick. "Help's coming. Just hold on, please." Minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the rain-streaked windows of the shop below. Ben, carrying the now unconscious cat wrapped in his ruined jacket, met the paramedics and police at the shattered stockroom door. The scene inside was one of wanton destruction. Shelves overturned, glass cases smashed, papers scattered, but the lacquered box under the desk was untouched. Ben gave a terse statement, his focus solely on the small, broken body being carefully transferred to an animal ambulance. He climbed in beside the stretcher, the pendant heavy in his pocket, the cat's faint, shallow breaths the only sound that mattered. The sterile, bright chaos of the emergency animal hospital was a blur of beeping machines, antiseptic smells, and urgent voices. Ben paced the small waiting room, the velvet pouch clutched in his hand, the letter from his grandmother burning in his mind. "They took my eye long ago trying to find it." The cat's ruined face swam before him. The pendant. The legacy. The shadows. Dr. Eris Thorne, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands, emerged hours later, her scrubs stained. Ben's heart stopped. "He's alive," she said, her voice calm but weary. It was touch and go. Massive blood loss, infection raging in that shoulder wound. We've debrided it, stitched him up, put him on heavy antibiotics and fluids. He's on a ketamine drip for the pain now. The old eye injury, that's long healed, but it tells a story." She paused, studying Ben's haggard face. "He's a fighter, a real street warrior. But Ben, there was something else. We found microchips. 2. Ben stared. 2? Dr. Thorne nodded. One was defunct, unregistered, probably from years ago, maybe a failed adoption. The other, it was fresh. Very fresh. Implanted perhaps only days ago. And it wasn't just an ID chip. It was a tracker. Ice flooded Ben's veins. The deliberate scrape outside the door. The targeted destruction. They hadn't just been looking for the shop. They'd been tracking the cat. The cat who had found the pendant. The cat connected to his grandmother's secret. "Can you remove it?" Ben asked, his voice tight. "We already did," Dr. Thorne confirmed. "Along with the old one. He's clean. Now." But Ben, who would do that? And why? Ben had no answers she would believe. Only the impossible weight of the pendant and the words of a dead woman. He was allowed into the recovery room later. The cat lay on a heated pad, swathed in bandages. An IV line taped to his shaved foreleg, his breathing slow and deep under sedation. The fierce street fighter looked heartbreakingly small and vulnerable. Ben pulled a chair close, reaching out slowly. His fingers brushed the fur on the cat's good cheek, avoiding the bandages. The cat didn't stir, lost in a drug-induced haze. But Ben needed to touch him, to feel the fragile life he was now bound to protect. He traced the line of a prominent scar along the cat's jaw. "You brought me the light, didn't you?" he murmured, the words from the letter echoing. And the shadows followed. Days blurred into a tense vigil. Ben visited constantly, reading aloud from old books, talking nonsense, just letting the cat hear his voice. The shop remained closed. A crime scene. Police had no leads. Ben didn't mention the letter or the pendant. The world outside felt dangerous, uncertain. His focus narrowed to the small recovery cage. The first time the cat's eye opened, truly focused, it found Ben sitting beside him. The sedation had lessened. The emerald gaze was hazy but aware. Ben held his breath. He slowly extended a finger towards the cage bars, not touching, just offering. The cat watched the finger, then slowly, painfully tilted his head. The tip of a rough pink tongue flicked out, touching Ben's fingertip. Once, a whisper of contact. A silent acknowledgement. Ben's eyes stung. The bridge built in the rain and blood held. Bringing him home was both a relief and a new kind of terror. Ben had transformed his small apartment into a safe haven. Soft beds, easy access, all sharp, corners padded. The cat, whom Ben had tentatively started calling Sir for his inexplicable dignity, despite his ragged state, moved with a stiff, painful gait, the bandages bulky on his shoulder. He explored cautiously, sniffing corners, the ghost of his alleyway confidence returning slowly. He gravitated towards a sunbeam slanting through the window and collapsed with a sigh, his watchful eye never straying far from Ben. The bonding deepened, in quiet moments. Sir would limp painfully to where Ben sat reading Gran's letter for the 100th time, seeking not food, but proximity. He'd curl up beside Ben's chair, his body radiating warmth, his purr a low, rumbling vibration that started tentatively, then grew stronger as days passed and wounds healed. It was a sound Ben felt as much as heard, a tangible sign of trust being rebuilt. One evening, as a sudden thunderclap shook the windows, a sound eerily reminiscent of the door breaking, Sir startled violently. Instead of fleeing, he scrambled, weakly into Ben's lap, burying his head against Ben's chest, trembling. Ben held him close, murmuring reassurances, feeling the frantic heartbeat gradually slow against his own. Shared fear, shared comfort. The connection was now bone deep. The letter revealed fragments of a hidden world. Gran spoke of a society, the keepers of the lumina, protectors of ancient artifacts of light and knowledge, hunted by a shadowy group called the Obscurati. The lion and moon pendant was a key, a compass pointing towards a hidden repository of their lore. Gran, a keeper, had hidden it before they came for her. She hinted the cat wasn't just a messenger. He was a guardian spirit, bound to the pendant, a concept Ben struggled to grasp yet couldn't dismiss, looking into Sir's ancient-seeming eye. "He sees what others cannot," Gran wrote. "He led me to the light when I was lost. He will guide you, Benjamin. Trust him." Weeks passed. Sir's physical wounds healed, leaving stark scars as badges of his brutal past. The limp faded. His coat, nourished by good food and care, grew thick and lustrous, the tabby markings striking. But the emotional scars lingered. He startled at loud noises, his eye widening with remembered terror. He was wary of strangers, a low growl rumbling in his chest if someone approached Ben too quickly. Yet, within the sanctuary of the apartment with Ben, he transformed. the feral edge softened. He developed a fondness for chin scratches delivered with precise gentleness, leaning into Ben's hand with a deep, resonant purr. He'd play, cautiously at first, then with increasing joy, batting at feather toys with surprising grace despite his missing eye, his movements losing their defensive tension, becoming fluid, almost elegant. He'd sit regally on the windowsill, surveying the street below with a calm detachment that hadn't been there before. No longer a creature of the shadows, but an observer from his safe perch. The street fighter was learning to be a gentleman. The final twist came on a crisp autumn morning. Ben was sorting through a box of old books donated to the reopened shop. Sir, now moving with confident ease, hopped onto the table, sniffing curiously. Ben pulled out a heavy illustrated volume on Arthurian legends. As he flipped it open, a color plate depicting Excalibur, the sword and the stone, gleamed up at him. Sir immediately nudged the book with his head, purring loudly. Ben chuckled. "You like the knights, sir? Brave fellows." He turned the page. Another plate showed King Arthur holding the sword aloft. Sir placed one large, soft paw directly on the image of the king, looked up at Ben, and gave a distinct, affirmative-sounding chirp. Ben froze. He looked from the picture to the cat, the noble bearing, the single, watchful eye, the lion on the pendant, the once and future king. A shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of profound, eerie recognition. It wasn't just a name. It was an echo of the legacy Gran described, the guardian spirit bound to the light. "Arthur?" Ben whispered, the name feeling strangely right on his tongue. The cat, Arthur, blinked his single brilliant emerald eye slowly. Then, with deliberate care, he stepped off the book, walked across the table, and butted his head gently against Ben's hand. Not a demand, an acceptance, a benediction. In that quiet gesture, the mysteries of the pendant, the letter, the shadows, and the extraordinary creature who had bridged the gap between Ben's ordinary world and his grandmother's hidden legacy coalesced. Arthur wasn't just saved. He was home. He wasn't just a cat. He was a guardian, a guide, and now, irrevocably, Ben's. The shadows hadn't vanished. The thread of the obscurity lingered, a chilling undercurrent. The pendant's purpose remained, a path yet untraveled. But as Ben looked into Arthur's calm, knowing gaze, the fear receded. They had faced the storm together. They had found trust in the ruins. They had built a castle out of compassion, brick by painstaking brick. Ben stroked Arthur's head, feeling the rumble of the purr vibrate up his arm, a sound that spoke of safety, of belonging, of hard-won peace. The battle-scarred stray who had delivered destiny in a velvet pouch now sat beside him, a poised, one-eyed gentleman surveying his kingdom. The journey from cage to castle was complete. The shadows might return, but they would face the light together. The castle had its king. Every castle needs its king.